So on to this evening, our speakers. Unfortunately, Tom has had to drop out, but our two panellists are Jen and Joe.
Hi everyone, my name is Joe Kibbler. I'm the founder of a company called IcarusParts.com. So we're a disruptive startup in the automotive space. So we focus on making the car repair process much more transparent. So traditionally, if you go to a garage and they say to you, it might cost £200 for brake pads, we show you the true cost and ultimately try and save you money. So you put in your registration number on our platform, you choose whatever job you need, so let's say front brake pads. We show you the total cost up front, including parts and labour. We've then got a network of garages across the UK who fit those parts. So you put in your postcode, we show you the closest garage to you. You choose a garage based on its location, reviews, again completely up to you as the customer. You can then book in through our system as well, so you give it different time slots, and then finally you transact with us. So what we're trying to give customers is much more transparency in a traditionally very grey market, and ultimately save you money on your car repairs. So we vet all garages to make sure they meet our standards, and we have direct relationship with parts suppliers. In terms of our business model structure, think of an Airbnb delivery of car parts. So we're B2B2C, so we don't own any stock, we don't buy stock, we charge our suppliers a commission on each part we sell. That's what we do.
I'm Jen, and I'm the co-founder of a company called Fluence. We have an analytics platform for language. So what a lot of people do to numbers and sort of analytics that people do to numbers, we use language. Aston is actually one of our very first customers, and I'll sort of give you an example of how someone might use a language analytics platform. We will be looking at a particular module here at Aston and looking at the language register for the particular module. Then we're going to be gauging at where does a student start their particular learning journey with the module. And then we're going to analyse how much of a learning journey does that student need to travel in order to get that first, that 2-1 or that third. And then what we want to do is take it another step further, and let's have a look at all the learning materials that you're provided with. Do they actually help you get to that journey? And then to take it another step further, we want to get to the bespoke learning part where we don't all learn the same way. So for each individual, for all your different starting points, what is the next best thing you can learn in order for you to be successful? So that's an application for universities, but to be honest, we're going to be working with audit officers, so people who do normally deal with numbers, they're now going to be dealing with language. We're working with authorities, all sorts of different places. What most of our customers have in common is they're normally very knowledgeable, so they normally have a lot of content and they use a lot of language. They're normally an authority, so they normally know what they're talking about. But they're also very accountable to someone. So a bit like the university with students, they're normally very sort of need to prove that actually, yes, you know, this is the right thing for you to do. They need to be able to back it up. So we're the language analytics platform.
Great. And have either of you had any businesses in the past?
I actually, you know the pitching competition that Kath was just talking about? I was actually here at Aston University, and I won that competition one year, so that was very cool. My first tech business was Data Discretion, and it was a data encryption technology that I developed alongside with my dad actually at the time, and then a few other people. I did really well to a certain extent. I joined Speed West Midlands, I was part of E4F, I was part of Speed, B-Scene, and yeah, I got quite far to an extent, and then realised that there were definitely some hurdles of getting things into the marketplace. And then I've been part of other startups, so startups that I haven't co-founded. I've been part of a corporate journey, so I've also worked in other much larger businesses, and then come full circle by co-founding another tech startup. So that's where I am today.
Short answer, this is my first tech startup. I was a freelancer when I was 19 as a project manager to the Department of Health. Then went to university, then I was working in corporate jobs. So I started off as a strategy analyst at an automotive OEM. So what I mean by OEM is you've got brands like Jaguar Land Rover, OEMs are the tier above, so the part manufacturers. So I was there for about 2 years, then went to Jaguar Land Rover, again as a strategy analyst, and then similar story. I resigned and set up the business. Think I had an itch, validated it as much as I could before resigning, and yeah, resigned in June 16.
And with both of your businesses, can you tell us about how you came up with the idea and how did you know it was worth pursuing?
So our business, I explained before, is B2B2C. So I started working in the automotive sector. From a B2B point of view, I found it to be very traditional, and I thought technology could be used to disrupt that. So it was traditionally a very dated supply chain, and a lot of manufacturers wanted to be able to access the end consumer. So I thought they could use technology to enable them to do that. I came in relatively new, so I was looking at it from a customer's perspective. I was like, well, I would love to know if I could save money on car repairs. I would love to know if I could buy a cheaper brand and how it fits in my car. But again, consumers aren't always given those options. So from that, I then started to explore it a bit further. And then it went from there really. So I started to validate it as much as I could whilst working. So working on weekends, going and speaking to garages, just turning up and speaking to garages to get their feedback, speaking to customers, building really basic websites to get customers to give us their email addresses. And we use all that kind of validation to start the business. I think that was the answer to the question, right? Yeah, that's fine.
So with Fluence, it's a little different for me than it was for my first tech startup, in that I was actually working for a different company called Rapid English, and they specialised in providing specialist literacy sessions for those who just hadn't quite got to where they needed to be. And it was a really simple concept. 80% of daily communication comes just from 20% of the language. And as more and more of the public sector services were struggling with funding, the business was harder and harder to maintain. It was harder and harder to reach those people. So we actually created a foundation to help with that side, but that wasn't really fulfilling the ambition I had for what it is we were trying to do. So my co-founder and I kind of realized that actually the same thing that we did for the daily communication, you could actually apply to any course or any situation. So to accelerate someone's onboarding journey or their learning journey, actually it's fairly simple. You just need to analyze it first. And we realized no one analyzes language. So that's kind of how we come up with that, a bit of a passion project.
And can you talk to us a bit about who your customer is? Who are you selling your service to? And how did you discover that, and how has that maybe changed since you first started, if at all?
Mine's complicated. You go first.
Okay, I think there's 3 bits to that question, so I'm going to probably forget a bit of it. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're a B2B2C marketplace. So our true customer, so our customers that transact with us, are the car drivers. So they usually own a car over 3 years old. That's when it's usually out of its warranty period. And at that point, if you go to a franchise dealer, you're potentially paying a lot more than you need to. So the average age of our customers' cars are between 5 and 8 years old. We see a lean towards males by about 65%. However, we get a lot of engagement with our female customers as well, because ultimately the feedback we get from our female customers is they like the fact they have the transparency with us, and they just go to garage, drop the keys off, and that's all they have to do. We handle the rest. But before we could sell to a customer, we have to first sell our concept to global OEMs. So these are big, we work, for example, with the 6th largest automotive company in the world. We need to sell it to them to get them on board. Now, in order to do that, we have to focus on a really strong value proposition, and that's a 6 to 9 month negotiation process. On the top of that, we also have to sell it to a garage, because the concept is built around garages fitting parts. So for those of you who have got some understanding of the automotive sector, you probably know that garages make money on parts in which they sell to consumers. With us, they don't make any money on the parts. So straight away, that was a potential blocker for us. So we had to discover the best way to sell to a garage to get them signed up, which took a lot of pain. So for us, first of all, we've got to sell to the garages and the suppliers, then we can sell to our direct consumer. If we bought stock like a traditional company, much simpler, because we can go to suppliers or a distributor and buy stock. In terms of how do our customers find us, so this is the end customer, the car driver, we place a lot of emphasis on Google PPC, so that's Google Ads. We try social, but we see engagement through social, but very little in terms of conversions. That's not surprising when I spoke with other founders with similar businesses, so i.e. intent and need-based, because if you need something, you're more likely to do a Google search versus a Facebook ad. So for example, if I target all of you tonight with Facebook ads saying, do you need new brake pads? I've got no idea if you need new brake pads. Where if you search on Google, you're more likely to need that doing. And then, has customer changed, I think? Customer hasn't really changed, but we do explore B2B concepts. So that's something we're looking at the moment. But our core customer, own a car over 3 years old, wanting greater transparency and don't have a trusted garage.
So our customer base is really broad. We call it the knowledge sector or the knowledge economy. So really that gives us loads of companies and loads of organizations to be going at. We definitely started with universities just because it was our comfort zone, right? So we'd already come from an educational background and it made sense to go into universities. Universities are also an interesting time at the moment where actually students do demand different services. Employers employing university students, they want to know that it's in line with what they're looking to hire. So it's a really good time for us. Interestingly, the way we find our customers has changed even just in the past 6 months. So whilst we first went out with, oh, of course, we'll go and sell to universities, not the quickest buyers. So it takes much longer to actually onboard a university, get someone interested in the new technology, because of course they've got a huge responsibility. What we're finding much more successful is there's loads of innovation tenders or feasibility studies where organizations, mainly public sector organizations, are actually putting out a problem that they have. And we're finding that with a lot of these tenders, they put a problem out and we can actually wrap our solution around it. So it gives us a really great chance of explaining why someone should be interested in language analytics. And we've been extremely successful with that. And as a side, it kind of helps us prove our concept in multiple sectors. So we really see ourselves long-term being positioned more like something like Trello or Slack, where it doesn't really matter where we sit, anyone professional will want to use it.
And can you tell us a bit more about the tech itself, the product? So did you have a team that built that? Did you do it yourselves? Can you just tell us about how you got started with the actual tech product?
So I'm not technical, and I made that very clear to our investors and partners from the very beginning. So when we first were looking to build the tech, it was myself as sole founder was, do we use a white label solution, so Shopify for example, or do we build the tech from scratch? And after we mapped it out, we realized actually we do need to build this from scratch, because if it was just a transactional e-commerce store, you've got a lot of existing solutions you can use already without having to build something from scratch. So we chose the decision to recruit a CTO. He's now a CTO co-founder. I'm fortunate because I knew him from a different startup, so we have a really good relationship. And he's accountable for all tech in terms of development. So if you've got any questions on language and stuff like that, probably not going to be able to answer them because he's accountable for that.
I'm also not the techie in our business. And the way we started out is because we were spinning out from Rapid English, we first of all just invested some of Rapid English's money into just seeing if what we thought was possible was even possible. So we actually outsourced a feasibility project ourselves just to see on a small scale, did the concept have legs at all? And then as time went on, we were winning grants. We started finding our first round of investors for our seed A. And that's when we then started to hire people internally. I'm really lucky I've got a co-founder who's really kind of more from a linguistic background, but really technically able. So whilst they don't code themselves, they really kind of are able to take on that CTO role. And then we've got a really great team.
We've kind of answered it a bit, but how did you kind of fund your business in the early days?
So for the first 8 months when I was just working on it in my spare time, there was no investment at all. So that was just doing whatever I could to validate it. In the early days, we took on friends, family, and a small investment group called Startup Funding Club, which are based in London. They put money into the business in, I think it was like August 16. And we basically set a 6 month deliverable. So that was garages signed up, more investment, letters of intent from suppliers, and initial customer base. If we could get those things, we then said, okay, we're going to start building the tech and getting the contract signed manufacturers. From that, they've supported our growth, so the same fund, but some angels have come in and essentially syndicated rounds. We're now at the position where we're trying to scale up and ideally close a much larger round later in the year.
So we started off by self-funding, and then we found grants. So we definitely started the business more from a social enterprise point of view, where we really felt passionate about helping people become the best thing they could be in the shortest amount of time. And then that snowballed, I guess. From one grant came our first project, and then we decided, well, if we're ever going to get a bigger team together, if we're actually going to do this, we need to get some investment. So we were very fortunate and had a charity invest in us, and we also had some angels invest in us, and we're scaling up this year as well, so we'll be going for a Series A this year.
And if you think about everything you've experienced so far, what have been some of the biggest challenges you faced starting up your business?
Raising money was new to me, so whilst I had done, my first data discretion tech startup, I never raised money for that one. Getting investors on board was an initial challenge, and then having a board to report to, doing all the paperwork for that was overwhelming initially. I've got a board meeting tomorrow. I've been doing all the paperwork for it and actually finding it really useful. So, I think actually being a bit uncomfortable with that is good. At the time, I probably didn't feel like that. I think the most stressful time I've ever had in my working career probably was when half of our investment had come in, but they depended on this other investor who was kind of all sewn up and it was all fine. I was flying off on holiday, and then I got a call when we were at the airport and they were like, oh, I'm getting cold feet. And that was not a good start to a 2-week holiday. And that was probably the most stressful because we'd kind of already planned. It was kind of a done deal, but of course, ink on the dotted line hadn't happened and the money wasn't in the bank. And thankfully, it did take quite a lot to close the deal in the end. It took an extra 6 weeks. But yeah, those were probably rather challenging. And I'd just say was always allow enough time for investment.
Yeah, I'd echo that last point, absolutely. Everything takes longer when it comes to investment. Everything will take longer. And if you give yourself 4 weeks, it will take you 8 or a lot longer. It just always happens because of examples of what you've just gone through, getting paperwork signed, negotiating valuation, accountants, everything will take longer. The one exception where it sometimes can be quicker is if you've got existing shareholders and they're putting more money into the business. So for example, with one of our investors who represents a fund, they had some money left over that they had to use for a tax year, and they just said, do you want the money? And just put it into the bank account. That was nice, but it's very, very rare that you get that. Biggest challenges I can echo in terms of raising money. This was my first experience of it. And when I look back on my first deck, it's absolutely horrendous, like shockingly bad. But that gets better with time, and you go through so many different iterations of it, and you get better at pitching, you get better at rebutting questions and feedback, so you do learn a lot. What challenging for us, well, the supplier base and getting that on board. I came from that market, so introductions for me was relatively simple into these big corporations. However, if you're trying to get into big traditional companies, I can imagine that's quite tough. Garages, I got the first 40 signed up myself. But there would be days where I'd drive round and it would just be like, get out of my garage, in a lot ruder words. So that's sometimes depressing, and you just got to start a day afresh. I would actually say one of the biggest challenges are your customers, because for us, again, we're a three-sided marketplace. We've got the 2 bits nailed. The customer base is the biggest challenge because with us, we can't speak to our customers. They click a Google ad, they go through a sales funnel. I would love to be able to just pick up the phones every single time someone puts in the reg number on our site, speak to them, find out what they like about it, what they don't like, why they're dropping off, because that kind of data is really valuable. We do focus groups, but focus groups aren't your true customer, and even if they're looking for a car repair, you want to ideally find your customer as close as you can to the real scenario. So for us, I want someone who's had a service to an MOT, they need something doing on their car, they've clicked a Google ad, and they're going through our sales funnel. But of course, I can't force them to speak to us. So I think that's probably one of the challenges we face as well.
So what about some of the successes, some of the high points?
securing the investment felt like a huge success after, and maybe it made it sweeter for all the challenges beforehand. That was a huge one. We've got to a team of 10. That's the biggest I've ever been in a startup, so that's been nice. Actually, even there were some smaller milestones that felt really cool. Moving from a really small office to a much bigger office with our own meeting rooms. There were just little things along the way that just, did kind of mean something. Signing a lease for 3-5 years. That was scary, but also exciting.
For us, similar kind of thing. If you get external investment, it shows that someone believes in what you're doing. Because if you take investment from friends, family, they call it the 3 Fs, or was it friends, family and fools, I think it is, as the early stage stuff. That's good because it can help you, but I wouldn't recommend you do that long term. And even if they offer to give you more money, I probably wouldn't take it, because ideally you want to find people in the market who are completely independent and believe in what you're doing. So when we got external funding from a fund and other individual angels, we felt it was more validation for us, which is great. We won a couple of awards, which was nice to get the PR around it. Getting contracts signed with big traditional automotive companies, getting them to do business in a completely new way was great. And I think probably the biggest thing is paying customers. Paying customers every time you get a Trustpilot review, every time a customer says, I love your service, every time that customer comes back to use you again, it just reinforces what you're doing serves a need for a customer, and I think for us that's always the thing we try and focus on.
Amazing. So you both run tech businesses in Birmingham. In terms of the kind of tech scene here in the city, are there any things you'd recommend going along to, like events or things you can get involved with?
So you've got B Scene, which are part of Aston, so the first one I think I have to mention. You've got Next Door, which is iCentrum. No longer E4F, unfortunately. That was a European funding project, so unfortunately that's now come to a close. So the closest you've got to that is something called a Serendip program. The way they structure that program is you've got different corporate partners, so off the top of my head, Barclays, which we're part of, National Express, NHS, and there might be another, but I can't remember. And you can essentially apply to one of those programs via the Serendip application portal, and that's like I think it's like a 6-month accelerator program. So you get access to their network, you get 6 months free office space. They hold investment events every quarter, and they've got a lot better. The last one I went to, they're doing really well in terms of getting London VCs to come up to Birmingham. If any of you actually start a tech business, one thing you'll probably quickly find is you will have to go to London as opposed to then coming up here, because it just doesn't happen. All of our investors are in London and I have to go to London. They've never once come up here. But to be fair to Innovation Birmingham, they're running these pitch events now, and whilst you're unlikely to secure investment from those events, it's actually a good way to make yourself known and get the initial contacts. The community is also really good with Innovation Birmingham because you've got people that have raised money, you've got people who know different companies, so you can bounce ideas off a lot of people. And then the final one off the top of my head is Silicon Canal. They run a few networking events, similar kind of structure to Innovation Birmingham, really. So I think if you want to get involved with both of those, just check out their websites, I think.
Sounds good. You know a lot more about the Birmingham scene than I do. So I guess I kind of did a lot of the Birmingham scene with my previous startup. With this one, actually, we joined an accelerator in Bristol, and that was just because for the maturity or the level of our startup, having kind of got that first round of funding and already having a few employees on, we did need that extra step. And now we're kind of considered a scale up. So we found all our investors in Bristol. So yeah, I think London or Bristol or some other hubs. Birmingham doesn't have a great investment community, but it is really growing. I'm finding that whenever I hear about something new, I'm just a little bit too ahead for it. So it's definitely worth keeping an eye out for what's coming up, because the community is getting really big, and I think there is a lot about to happen in Birmingham, and it is just catching up with places like Bristol. So yeah.
So this is a bit of a big question, but for everyone in the room who's thinking about starting up, what advice would you have? What are kind of some of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way that you can share?
Oh God, okay. biggest piece of advice I could have is make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. So if you're doing it just to stick it on your CV because you think it looks cool, wrong reason. It'd also be a lot harder than you expect, a lot harder. So having a lot of mental determination, I'd say, is absolutely really critical. I remember when I first started as well, I went to, I'm not going to say where, I went to an accelerator or workspace in London, and a guy who claims to be a mentor, we just spent an hour arguing, and he said, I'm never going to use you. And I was like, well, have you got any automotive experience? No. And he was like, suppliers are never going to sign a contract with you. I was like, okay, have you got any automotive experience whatsoever? No, I've got none. We then got 3 contracts signed with big companies. So you're going to get a lot of feedback from lots of different people. If you pick, and it's, as a founder, it's your job to then take on board themes of that, not disregard everything, because you can get some really useful feedback to try and improve what you're doing. I think what helps me as well, if you've got a really solid foundation in terms of your personal life, because your business life will become very uncertain in the early days. Hopefully after 12 months that will become more certain, but you just don't know. It's the very nature of a startup. So I think that's it actually. That's the question, is it? Was there anything else? Lessons or advice? I think that's it? Yeah, so that's it.
My advice would be doing it alone is really lonely, just to kind of state the obvious. So I'm really lucky with Fluence. I've got a really good co-founder. He also happens to be my husband, which means we can't ever escape work, but it works really well for us. That means that when you do have those lows, you're in it together. It's you know, you kind of have your ride or die buddy a little bit beside you, and you can commiserate and celebrate all those important things. We have had so much advice, sometimes welcome, sometimes really not that welcome. We call them piranha pits when you get like advisors and they sort of rip everything to shreds. And to be honest, they're some of the most useful things that have probably happened to us, to be honest. I hate them. I really hate them, but they're so useful. And I think the advice is so good. Listen to everybody, but just think of their credentials. So just because they don't understand it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. If you hear that time and time again, it's probably something worth listening to. And also being able to do something else for a little bit. I'm really guilty of not doing it, but actually not always doing your business, because it can be your passion project. It should be your passion project, but there should be other things too. Like there should be room for a little bit of something else. So try and keep that balance, I think.
Great, thank you very much. Right, I think we'll open it out to questions from all of you, if you've got any questions for Joe and Jen.
I have a question for Jennifer. How did you first get to contact the universities before selling it to them?
That's a really good question. I think I made a lot of cold calls, which I did not get. Yeah, some people really don't like cold calls. A lot of people hate cold calls. I don't even know if you could do that now with GDPR, actually. Events is a really nice, like, warmer space to go to. So I, on a total whim, flew out to BET Asia in Kuala Lumpur and just went to see some of the universities out there. And bizarrely, I met more leads from UK universities out there than I did at BET London. And it's just because it was a bit of a smaller event. Somehow we're all jet lagged there, I guess. So we all kind of had that in common, and I built better relationships out there than I did here. So sometimes doing that slightly quirky thing. I also made a video brochure very early on because I had no tech to show. I had to sell the dream. So we created a video and had a video brochure which people hadn't really seen at that time or hadn't seen in the education field. So people kind of thought we were very techie for just having this video brochure. And it helped them explain the concept to colleagues as well. So that was really useful.
Just a question for Joe. I'm just slightly curious because you do depend on garages to provide that particular service, and you did say that they were blockers.
Yeah.
What were the incentives that you provided them to sort of get on board?
I think one of the biggest things I did in the very early days, which was immensely valuable, I'm so glad I did it. So before, I didn't consider myself a salesman at all. Hated cold calling, but you just had to throw yourself into the deep end. I got really valuable intelligence from garages about what our competitors do and why garages hate what our competitors do. So I could change our proposition to make sure we address garages' concerns. So by having that feedback, it meant that when we approached garages, we got a lot better feedback in terms of signing up. So now, for example, so we tried quite a few things to get garages signed up. We tried field sales, effective but expensive, because you can imagine having one person driving around garages is not that effective in terms of scaling. Tried emails before GDPR, not effective. I think of 1,000 emails, we had one response. The most effective for us is telesales, by far. So we could do something like 90 garages joining just one telesales exec. So but the point being is we've nailed that proposition to garages in terms of what are the true benefits for them and what is the true value proposition. So I think anytime if any of you are doing a business which you've got to sell to a customer who's a business, and you probably echo this, is really have a really solid value proposition on how you benefit them, how you better than the competition, and what's the value you can add to them in terms of working together. And that's what we focus on. So now, whenever I was selling to a supplier or garages, we don't hard sell. We tell them what we do, we discuss the benefits, and we leave it as that. We don't call them back every day, we let them come back to us. Because garages, one thing they hate is being overly sold to. And we had someone working with us once, and their style of selling was talking over a garage, and did not go down well. So understanding your customers how to sell is actually really important.
With GDPR, for Joe, how much does it impact your Google PPC performance?
Google PPC, not too much. Google PPC, I think, is absolutely fine. Doesn't really affect us, because bear in mind, in what context are you asking the question?
In terms of like data retrieved from your customers.
So, okay. Depends what you do with it, okay? So let's say, for example, let's say you want to test a business idea. So let's say you put a social ad on Facebook saying, I don't know, I want a quote for X, and that's what you're saying to customers, and you're asking the customer to give you their email address. You could respond to them giving that quote, but you can't keep emailing them with them different propositions. So we've got a huge email database, and to be honest with you, we can't contact half of them with marketing promotions unless they opt in. And that's the one thing you've got to be really strict on. Google Ads, if someone clicks on an ad, so what? I mean, for us, it's not an issue. Vehicle reg, we can't get any personal data from that. So we store it securely, but ultimately it's non-identifiable data. We only have that once customers transacted with us. So the only reason we contact our customers, if they haven't opted in for marketing, is to make sure they're happy with the experience, if they've got any questions, or to confirm bookings. So that's the way we manage it.
Joe, I have to ask you, first of all, I appreciate, because for a successful business, it's very hard to be a successful, because I've been in that place. The one thing which I faced when I had my startup, like being a founder, is very hard to found a good team and aligning that team onto a vision. So what's your point to align a good team on your vision?
I'll take that in two sections then, team and vision. Team, first of all, we had one CTO who started this in the beginning. He was very, very good, but for a multitude of reasons, this didn't work out. The CTO who I work with now, I knew him from a previous startup, get along really well, we got a really good relationship, and we were aligned to the same vision. So similar point in our lives, and he wants to do a similar thing to me. I exit from a business in an X amount of time and do other things. I've also got a really good, I call him a marketing exec, but he does whatever we need. So operations, marketing, the whole raft of things. He's actually a graduate. I met him at the University of Birmingham last year, and I said to him, listen, you're joining an early stage company. It's not going to be that structured, it's high risk, but that's what he wanted, and he's got a similar vision. So the one thing I've always found in selecting team members is make sure they have that same vision, and what I do is communicate that. So for us, the vision from day one has always been to expand internationally and become a global automotive company in the tech space. So we have got, and the way I demonstrate that is we have got competitors where I can look at what they've achieved in terms of revenue figures, and I can say we want to be here in 6 years' time, in 8 to 9 years' time, we want to be exited at X valuation. Of course, you've got no idea if you can achieve it, but it's something you're working towards. At least then the team are aligned on what you want to do.
Jen, have you got any thoughts on that?
Team members, scaling is really hard. So we've hired from October, we grew by 5 extra people, and actually we were only 4, and then suddenly there's 9 of you. So I'd really echo a lot of what you've been saying, really, in terms of making sure that everyone believes in the same vision. We are really passionate about the tech that we use, so we get loads of techies who are just really interested in doing the AI and the machine learning algorithms that we use. We've got computational linguists who are really passionate about the language and NLP. And then a lot of us on the business side are really passionate about helping people improve themselves in the quickest way possible. So all together, all these different passions all come together to be Fluence, and we talk about that a lot. We have a lot of vision days. We do a lot of team outings, actually. We do a lot of team days. Whilst we don't all have to be best friends, it really does help make the weeks go by quicker. And it's nice that we all get on, because you spend a lot of time at work. So I think making sure you get a personal fit is really important.
And when you hired your first person today, was that a massive step, and how did you know you were kind of ready to take someone on, make your first hire?
For us, that was a little more organic, because we had the Rapid English team, and then we were kind of spinning ourselves out into Fluence. The first hire for Fluence was scary because we're funding it ourselves, and that's like when the runway thing started of, oh my goodness, we're going to run out of money with this much time if we don't pull this big stunt off. So I think the first one actually was a little bit scary, and it was the tech person, and it's such a key hire for us, and they've really helped transform the business. So yeah, that was scary, and it's worked out really well for us. But
for us, it was a necessity because we spent the first 6 months validating it as much as we could, and at the next point for us was to start building the tech and building a product. We explored a few options, as I mentioned earlier: white label, agencies, and in-house. I am really glad we did in-house because it just means that someone owns it internally, and it also, when you go to raise money, it looks like you've got a solid team. Saying that, you don't need a CTO in day one. It's nice to have. If you know someone who could do the role, great, but you could find someone on Fiverr, an agency to do it. But I think the big piece of feedback: don't spend a fortune on it. Don't worry if it's not pretty, just get something to work. If you can get paying customers with it, fantastic. And then you can worry about improving it after.
This is to both of you. I just wanted to ask, do you think that you kind of possess the qualities of an entrepreneur in the beginning, or you kind of grew and learnt in the process of starting up your businesses?
Personally, my background was in 2 corporate jobs. I think that gave me a good foundation just in terms of dealing with a senior leadership team, presenting, collating documents, all those kind of things. So it gave me a good foundation. From that, you learn as you grow. So sales, for example, I had no background in sales, just learned how to do it. Same thing with pitching, investment, no background, you learn how to do it. I think the biggest thing when you are starting a business is the determination to learn and to grow though. So it's because you don't know everything in day one, but you learn from the experience. It's that determination to keep going, realize as well where your weaknesses are. So we have a good team. We've also got a good advisory team as well. So I made the decision from day one that we take on advisors where my weaknesses are, so we can learn from them and improve our skills. So I'd say biggest thing is just determination, and you learn.
I probably started off more from a point of startups. My dad is in startups and has been for years and years, so I always knew it was like an option. The reason I went into the first startup was really like almost like vindication. Like I had this need, I'd been wronged somehow, and my data had got stolen. A colleague stole it. They presented it as if they'd done all the work. And yeah, I was pissed. So I started the business because I had this real need, and that was a big driver for me, because I felt like at the time, as a very non-techie person, I didn't really know how to keep my documents secure. I didn't really know about where to store things, and who to safeguard from, really. Who would have thought you need to safeguard stuff from colleagues? But then, you're in a competitive environment, and there you go. And I think you do learn. So I caught the bug from like a place of like need, I guess, but then I did go on to do some corporate stints, and to be honest with you, I thought I was going to go into a corporate job for 6 months. I thought I was going to hate it. I thought I was just going to like make some money and then leave again to do my own thing. And I stayed much longer than I thought. I actually did enjoy learning around other people. I thought it really served a purpose for me. And then a few years in, I just kind of got this sense of my life isn't quite my own. Like, whilst I liked what I did, I wasn't like really excited about it. And I don't know if anyone else gets that Sunday evening feeling of like, ugh, Monday. And I just never got that with my first startup. And that's actually how I went back into being in a startup. And, you know, I don't get that Sunday evening feeling. I get the Sunday evening thing of doing too much work to try and prepare for Monday. But it's that thing of really feeling like the master of your own destiny. I think that's a real driver for me. But learning on the job, absolutely essential. And you're definitely never going to be an expert in everything. And as a founder or co-founder of a business, it does feel like you need to be an expert in a little bit of everything. So surrounding yourself with people who can pick up where you're weaker is actually fine. And you kind of learn that actually that's okay not to know everything straight away. But no one's going to be as passionate about your business as you are. And no one's going to have the vision. So actually it's okay to kind of get that help and expand on that and share that and get other people excited.
As you guys have got new business models and new ideas, do you think for young startups maybe they should stick to older, traditional, more common ideas and just do a tiny bit of thing differently, then start a whole new concept differently? Do you think that depends on the success of the business? A new idea versus a traditional model just done differently?
I would be a massive hypocrite if I said that, because both my businesses were kind of a bit left field and a bit wacky. Both really hard to explain initially. I probably did a terrible job the first few months of trying to explain what it was that my problem was and my solution was there to solve. We hire a marketing agency to help us with our wording now, to help us get to the place where people understand the need and the problem that we solve. Would it be easier to have to start, if you're just interested in owning your own business, then yeah, of course it'd be easier to do something that people easily understand and then almost go niche. And that could be a really good starting point. If the dream is, I want to be a business owner and I just want to start learning, I don't have a massively unique idea yet, I think that's a really great place to start and you'd learn an awful lot. But I think if you've got an idea that is a bit left field, I wouldn't say wait, definitely run with it, see if it has legs.
I would say probably it doesn't matter so much, but it depends on the opportunity and it depends if there is a need for it in the market. So, I mean, one example, you could argue that Just Eat existed before Deliveroo, and Deliveroo then started and was food delivery, but it was focusing on premium food delivery. So you could argue, is that groundbreaking, or is it just taking an existing business idea and improving it? Then you've got things like Airbnb and Uber, which are completely new. But then you've got traditional businesses, like not even tech, a pub, if there's a demand for it. So I would say it doesn't really matter if it's groundbreaking or if it's traditional. It depends on your take on it, what's the value you bring to customers, and will people pay for it, essentially.
I was wondering, at what point do you give yourself a salary as a co-founder or as a founder?
I gave myself a salary as soon as we take on external investment from a fund. That salary is not a lot because the idea being you're incentivized with the equity stake you have. That also comes back into the investors that support you. So if you get offered a deal early days and someone wants 30 or 40% of your business, then that's the wrong deal. Because then if your vision is to sell that for hundreds of millions in the future, then already you've given away too much. So you don't have enough equity to be incentivized. On the flip side of that, I think it's important that founders are paid something. I don't agree with being paid nothing because I think founders have still got to live. So yes, there's an element of that, but you don't pay yourself a corporate salary. Most definitely not.
Yeah, if you're looking at the corporate salary thing, it doesn't really exist for founders and co-founders, I think. We paid ourselves fairly early on, but a really sort of very base rate. And then our salary is up and down like a roller coaster, to be honest with you. Our salary is the first thing to go. Is the first thing to come back again, like before everyone gets new computers, I definitely want my salary back. But yeah, so that summer I talked about in terms of not securing investment, we were on the lowest salary I'd probably ever been in. I think I had an internship that paid more than what I was on, but I could pay like my bills. So that's all that mattered, keeping the business running, keeping the staff happy, keeping them all paid. And then ideally, and even once you get investors on board, they want to know that you can pay yourself something sensible. So, okay, it's not a corporate job salary, but it has to be reasonable because you have to be able to live. And actually, with the amount of work you're doing, you do need to be able to pay for some conveniences as well. Just to actually make sure that you can focus on the business and you're not trying to hustle something else to try and make money. So our investors were quite keen to make sure that we did take a salary and that we do kind of stay at a reasonable level, but the ultimate incentive is that payout at the end. And that's all down to being incentivized with having enough stake in the game.
I guess final question would be, what's next for your business? Where would you like to take it? What's the big vision for the next few years?
The really big picture for Fluence is we want to be a company that rolls out like Trello. So that's a really huge, ambitious target for us. But we really think that whilst people understand numbers, people analyze numbers, people use analytics for Google, measure all that, we don't measure language. So we really want to be that tool, be that vehicle. Short term, we're doubling in size this year. We're doing our first big series of fundraising. So that will be another new challenge for myself and my co-founder. So yeah, just doing all the milestones along to that big exit, hopefully one day.
For us, similar kind of long-term vision, big exit in the future. In the medium to long term, probably consolidate our position in the UK and expand into other countries. We want to nail essentially our playbook in the UK, so how to sign up garages, what's the most effective marketing strategy. So then what we can do is essentially raise money to scale and put a small team in each country and grow. And then we've got a data play that we'd like to explore in the future.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much.